For the first 441 chapters of Ichiro Oda's magnum opus manga One Piece, Roronoa Zoro was my favorite character in the story. I loved his resolve, I loved his stubbornness, I loved his terrible navigational skills, and of course, his badass swordsmanship. But in chapter 442, something changed. We met the humming swordsman, Brook. Throughout the early part of the series, and any time discussion about recruitment would come up, Luffy had repeatedly said that he wanted a musician. And we finally got one. And it wasn't someone that I ever would have or could have expected to become one of our beloved Straw Hats. On a broken ship, adrift on a haunted sea, we met a singing skeleton with an afro. It was unlike anything in the series at that point and immediately captured my attention. I have a particular love of spooky things and stories, so Thriller Bark was practically tailor-made for me, and it was Brook's big introduction. I loved meeting him and seeing how odd he was, almost out of his mind, which was understandable given that he had been stranded in complete solitude for a very, very long time. The prospect of a talking skeleton joining our pirate crew was just too perfect, and Luffy evidently agreed with me, considering that he immediately offered him a position with them, much to the rest of the crew's terror. As I read each chapter of Thriller Bark where Brook tried desperately to regain a lost piece of himself that made it impossible for him to truly join the crew, I couldn't believe how quickly I was endeared to him. He was so kind, so selfless, and so determined to get back what he had lost. His goals aligned with the Straw Hats, but even more than that, he found people that he enjoyed being around. All that time alone, and outside of his run-in with Moria, the first people that he found were exactly who he needed to find. He wanted to get his shadow back, to physically be able to leave the fog, but it was even more than that. He wanted a chance to truly live again, and the Straw Hats could help him do that. They could help him have a life and make the most of what was given back to him. They could take him away from that darkness and even give him the chance to make peace with his first life. It's worth noting that Brook is the oldest of the Straw Hat Pirates, and despite his occasional immaturity, his experience separates him from most of the others, as well as being the only person on the ship without skin. Yo! Brook's lively, sometimes perverse personality often leads to him being used as comic relief in the story, but it works so well because of his outward appearance. His skeletal figure is a constant visual reminder of the awful things that he endured. Even his skull jokes, where he makes fun of his lack of body parts that most people have, are morbid reminders of what Brook really is. A walking dead man that already had a shot at braving the Grand Line, and who was ultimately beaten by it. One Piece is renowned for its powerful emotional backstories that can shed so much light on characters. Oda takes time to dive into their pasts and what makes them tick. Often the things these characters have been through can be incredibly tragic, from Robin and Law's destructive, horrific past of genocide and abandonment, to even making the warped motives of a villain like Doflamingo somewhat understandable, but certainly not justified. Many of the Straw Hats have devastating upbringings or trials during their childhood, but Brook's flashback isn't about his youth. He was a grown man, a successful pirate that happily sailed with a crew that enjoyed adventure and music. We watch as they enter into the Grand Line going down Reverse Mountain, just like our Straw Hats did. It turns out they were the ones that brought the whale Laboon that the Straw Hats encountered, which was a mind-blowing, well-seeded twist that I was stunned by and still love so much. But as we have always been told, not everyone can survive on the Grand Line. The Straw Hat Pirates have managed to, but they are one of the exceptions. The Rumbar Pirates weren't so lucky. In one of the most devastating sequences I've ever read in a manga, Brook leads the wounded, dying Rumbar Pirates in one last performance, and as they bring music to life one last time, we see their numbers dwindle as they all start to succumb to their injuries one by one. I've never forgotten the moment when they go from a quartet, to a trio, to a duet, to just Brook playing a solo, the final member of the Rumbar Pirates who died that night, along with his crew. For 99.9% of the world, that would have been the end of his life. Brook would have died as a pirate that enjoyed his time with his crew but never got as far as he wanted, that never even got to see Laboon again. He would have just been another tragic victim of the seas, but thanks to his devil fruit, that wasn't the end. An important piece of his history that people overlook is what happened after that. He wasn't immediately found by the Straw Hats, no, he spent years on board that derelict ship, walking the deck that all of his friends had died on, sometimes hallucinating that they were still with him, that he wasn't alone. The Straw Hats didn't just help Brook step out into the sun and leave that cursed sea. They were the ones that really completed his revival, that gave him a purpose for the new life he'd been given. Brook's goal might be one of the simpler ones amongst the dreams of the crew. He's not trying to become the greatest at anything and isn't hoping to find some fabled ocean. When it comes down to it, Brook is just trying to reunite with a long-lost friend, the only remnant of his original life that he has left, besides his afro. The whale Laboon has waited for his musical pirate friends to return for decades, and Brook is Laboon's last hope too. They've both been waiting a long time to see each other again. I've seen criticism of Brook in some circles over the years. Some people think he doesn't contribute enough, doesn't have any larger ambitions, or is just used for gags. I've seen some say that Brook is a forgotten character, one that Oda doesn't really care about much, or doesn't give enough focus to, but I disagree. Brook isn't forgotten. He plays the role that he's supposed to play. A supporting character that comes in clutch when he needs to, and obviously Whole Cake Island was his time to really make a huge difference to help Luffy and show that. Whether it was managing to get an etching of Big Mom's poneglyph and personally stand up to her after, or smashing Mother Carmel's picture to expose Big Mom's weakness, or even just using his powers to do some significant damage to the Emperor and her own power in defense of the Sunny. Brook didn't have the narrative spotlight that arc like Sanji did, but he had his own part of the symphony to play, and he did so masterfully. Personally, I don't think Brook is meant to have the limelight cast on him again. Just being part of a successful pirate crew that he loves is his goal, because this is his second chance. A chance that the sea doesn't afford other pirates. He was beaten and crushed before, and had to watch all of his friends die, and now he can make sure that doesn't happen again. That his new crew succeeds in all of their endeavor. He fights for the ones he cares about, that pulled him out of his everlasting hell aboard that ghost ship, that saved him from being stuck in the fog of his own grief and his own loss. The Straw Hat Pirates helped Brook to live again. With his new crew, Brook has gotten a second chance at life, and he isn't gonna waste it.